now we're on a roll.
So you walk into a bar, and there's just a line of people waiting to punch you in the face. That's the punchline.
We're good? Okay. I know, now we got to do something else. We'll come back. You ready? Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the 8th grade. Welcome to teachers, and welcome to everybody who's watching this, both in the live stream and in the video recording. And mostly, I want to welcome our alumni panel. It's Tuesday, January 4th, 2022, and we've got 5 graduates of Maine Coast, although some of them probably think of themselves as American Eagle students more than Maine Coast students. And how this is going to work is each of these 5 students, Myah Garrison from the class of 2020, and Dylan Wu from the class of 2017, and Samantha Pierce, class of 2015, and Joe Newlin, class of 2014, and the granddaddy of the group, Nowell Stoddard, class of 2013. They're going to each get a chance to talk to you about their life, what it was like for them when they were students here, what they did after they left here, and where they're at in their life now, and how Waldorf education and American Eagle / Maine Coast has played a role in their life. I'm really excited about this, particularly because I have taught all 5 of these students, and down at the end, Mr. Stoddard is now teaching at the high school across the way where I teach. I'm the faculty chair and humanities teacher at the high school, and he's actually now a colleague. So that's a lovely turn of events. So what's going to happen is after they tell their story, we want to hear questions from you. Any questions you might have about what it's like to be in high school, what it's like to go to high school here, and what it's like to go forth and become an adult after you've been a Waldorf student. Okay? And so there are no bad questions, no wrong questions. And with that, I'd like to ask Myah Garrison, the most recent of the graduates, to give us a picture of her life.
Hello, everyone. As Mr. Barham said, my name is Myah. I joined Maine Coast Waldorf in 3rd grade, so around 2010. And my middle school teacher was Miss Chase, who's wonderful. I love her, but I don't think she works at the school anymore. And then I stayed in Waldorf up until my high school graduation in 2020, which was an interesting year. Immediately after high school, I took a gap year, and I worked retail for most of that year, and I also did a independent study for college credit. This was supposed to be a collection of short stories surrounding different genres, but it eventually turned into a Western novel, one genre. And so while I was doing retail and I was writing my Western, I sort of had a three-project year. Those were 2, and then I was also editing a book of poetry for a publication. This book I had started sort of at the beginning of senior year high school at a class that Mr. Reinhardt had invited me to, and then I wrote a little bit of it. I sent it through sort of a Maine Coast poetry class where it got a little edited, and then I finished it for a project, and I edited it my gap year. And then this past fall, I started my freshman year of college at Bennington College, which is a little liberal arts school in Vermont. Really pretty. Would recommend checking out the mountains there. And sort of just as I began my college semester, my freshman semester, I published my book of poetry, which is called Igor in Therapy. It's sort of a sci-fi epic poem. Sounds weird, only because it is. And then I finished my sort of independent study, and I, on a whim, figured, all right, I'm not going to write on this Western anymore because I have college. So I sent it off to a publisher, Dusty Saddles Publishing, and to my immense shock, they decided to publish it. And I was signed on for 4 more books in the series, which shocked me even more. So now, just to give you an idea of what my life is currently, I am attending college for creative writing / literature, and I am writing the 2nd book in my Western series, which is very fun. I have only been gone from Waldorf, Maine Coast Waldorf, for about a year and a half, so this is pretty recent, but already I have seen a lot of the ways in which Waldorf has affected me. Most immediately was when I got to college and I mentioned that I was a Waldorf student. All of a sudden, I had 20 friends that had also attended Waldorf schools, which was really fun. we were talking about, my school offers a Year With Me class, so we were all sort of talking about what that might be like, and comparing our schools to see who had the most culty school, I think was a conversation at one point, which was really fun. And even though they didn't wind up being like my core group of friends that I hang out with all the time, it was really nice to have an immediate group of people that I connected with. So that's one thing. Another thing is discipline is definitely not naturally something I'm adept at. And over my gap year, because I had to edit my poetry book, which was really, really intense editing for me, and write another book at the same time, I really needed discipline. And I don't think I could have done it if I hadn't gone through the writing program in the high school here, which is very rigorous. I can say that now, going to a school for writing in college. This writing here is probably more rigorous, if I'm honest. It gets you ready for that. It gives you the skills you need. And so, I don't know, that really helped me out with my books. That's mostly, I guess, what I thought about talking about here. But as a small coda, just because I find this really important to know before I go into a program, I can definitely talk to how Waldorf deals with learning disabilities and accommodations. For me, they were really, really good, and I've seen them handled really, really badly. But if anyone has any questions about that, I'm more than happy to answer.
Wow, thank you, Myah. That's great. And so any of the things that Myah spoke about, if those raise questions for you, if you want to explore those further after we hear from the others, fire away. Thank you, Myah. Dylan, tell us about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dylan Wu. I'm a Waldorf lifer, so I've been here, I was here K through 12. I also live really close to the school, just across the road. So my dog actually has run across the street to play with kids during recess many times without our knowing it. My class teacher at the start was Trina Hetherington, who's no longer here, but she passed the baton to Mrs. Thurl in 5th grade, who graduated us in 8th grade, and I graduated high school in 2017 and quickly fled New England to the Pacific Northwest to go to Whitman College, which is a small liberal arts school in the wheat fields of southeastern Washington. I dabbled in a lot of different subjects there at first, but eventually landed on studying computer science, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm currently a first-year master's student at the Rue Institute, which is through Northeastern University and is right here in Portland, Maine. The future for me is a little bit vague at the moment. I certainly plan to use my degree and work in the software industry. I'd say my long-term aspirations are to eventually lead some software project that I'm passionate about, and also give back through teaching what I've learned over the years in some capacity. Harkening back to my high school experience, one of my favorite memories was the Moby Dick block with Mr. Barham. I should say that my favorite part about that class was dissecting the text, analyzing the metaphors and characters, and learning new vocabulary words, but that was a lot of fun. But to be completely honest, the most fun I've had in any class was probably singing sea shanties before we actually opened the text and dove in, and with our guitars and Mr. Barham leading the way. That was a lot of fun, but it's also, it was a good example of the many ways in which in that class and in other classes I took at Maine Coast, we kind of brought the text kind of into the world that we were living in, and we were able to kind of use it to understand ourselves a little bit better. So another example was just learning how to tie the knots that the sailors used on the ship for that class. And of course, I can't forget the field trip we went on to Gloucester and Cape Cod, where we talked to Melville scholars about Moby Dick, and I went to museums and went on a whale watch as well. So that was definitely a standout experience, all in all, for me. Another way in which I think Waldorf education prepared me for college and life after college was just giving me more confidence to speak out in class and to kind of articulate my thoughts without and worrying less about what about the correctness of what I say. So an example of that was first year at Whitman. Every freshman is required to take a seminar where we read books and we discuss them, write about them, and there's a lot of going around having to be kind of interpret or summarize the text kind of on the fly. And this was scary and also with a very high probability of just getting it completely wrong. But I think that having to act in plays and having to take on kind of ridiculous, sometimes embarrassing characters allowed me to step out of myself and kind of let the character be embarrassed. And that allowed me to be, to have more confidence in speaking out. And I think that in turn allowed me to gain a richer education after high school was over. So yeah, that's it for me.
Dylan, those were my favorite parts of Moby Dick also. So if you have questions later about how someone who was so passionate about a literature block went on to go get his master's degree in computers, Dylan's your guy to ask. Let's keep going. Samantha.
I'm Sam, and I am also a lifer. I went from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade and graduated in 2015. And I began in first grade with Miss Campo as my teacher, who's no longer here. And then I think in third grade probably, a gentleman named Mr. Batzel was my teacher for 2 more years. And then this is all because of extenuating circumstances, not because of my class or anything, but he had to leave as well. And we had an assortment of substitute teachers for, I think, 6th grade. And they were wonderful. We had a whole crew of people helping us out to learn. And then I finished off 7th and 8th grade with Mr. Rennick, who was great and is also no longer here. But he was wonderful. And then I went on to the high school, and like I said, graduated in 2015. I did cross-country running and cross-country skiing in high school and middle school as well, which I say because I think it was pretty it was very relevant to my experience here and beyond. So yeah, and then I went on to Bates College, where I majored in environmental studies and I minored in education. Environmental studies is kind of a combination of, in the case of Bates College, it's a combination of science classes and humanities classes, where we talk about how humans and scientists and just general public interact with the world around us and the environment, and make laws around climate change and all of that sort of stuff. So I think I chose that major because of how interdisciplinary it was, and I was able to have the science and have the humanities and have all the social aspects of the subject, because that was something that I really loved about the high school, especially, where I didn't really feel like I had a favorite class per se. I enjoyed all of them and I enjoyed all the subjects, and so I was pretty torn when I got to college and I had to choose one, and I couldn't just study everything. So I think this one really helped cement kind of my love of lots of different aspects of studying. And I also minored in education and was able to spend a lot of time in the Lewiston public schools and learned a lot about the education system in Maine and beyond, and kind of broadened my view of education a little bit. I think my Waldorf experience was so, it was my whole childhood and my whole young adulthood, and then all of a sudden I got to college and I realized there are these other education systems out there and they're very different and they work differently. But I think having the Waldorf experience gave me a new lens to see that system as well. So I teach a lot in the Maine public schools now, and I think because I came to public schools and other versions of education through a lens of not growing up within it, I have a different perspective on it, which I think is valuable. So after college, I went on to become an educator at this place called the Leadership School, which is in Mid-Coast, Maine. And it's maybe even more funky than Waldorf School. We do a lot of activities that are called social and emotional learning. And basically, we play a game, and then we sit down and we talk about what happened in the game. And I think probably a lot of you can relate to some activities like that in Waldorf School. And we do these activities with middle schoolers, and the purpose is to work on communication and team building and relationships and learning about yourself and being aware of yourself and managing yourself around yourself and others. So that's a little bit of what I do now. And I've done that since I graduated, with a few little blips in between. So the summer directly after I graduated from college, I moved to Montana for a summer, and I worked in a shoe store, and I did a lot of hiking, which is very fun. And then I began this teaching job, and then COVID hit in March, and all of our programs were canceled. So I went back to Montana, where they pretended COVID didn't exist. So that was interesting. And I worked at a community garden and learned a lot about a different climate and a different garden system, which was really fun. And then I came back once last year, programs began happening again at the Leadership School, so I came back there. And then I moved into a new position there of environmental educator. So I'm working in some of my passions about the environment and nature into the curriculum that I teach now. So I do both the social and emotional aspects and a little bit of nature curriculum as well. And yeah, so one of my favorite memories, I think, from the high school at least, was, I don't know, do you still do the Wilder Olympics?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Oh, sure.
So you all will get to experience the Wilder Olympics next year. And it is this incredible event that the senior class puts on for the rest of the school. And just like the Olympics, there are many different competitions, and one of them was a clothing race. One of them was a fairy hut building contest. I think there was a skit adventure in there somewhere. But I just remember the fairy hut building contest and thinking, okay, this is going to be silly. You know, we're high schoolers. We're kind of a little too maybe old for this. Maybe not. Turns out we were not. And got very into it and built some very elaborate castles out of sticks. And I think that was it's at the beginning of the year, so I think it was a wonderful way to start out the year. And I felt like I built better relationships with all of my non-classmate schoolmates during that time. So that was a fond memory I'm looking back on.
What's a high school without a Wilder Olympics?
I don't know.
Thank you, Samantha. Joe, to you. Thank you, Samantha.
Hey everybody, my name is Joe Newlin. I graduated here in 2014. I am almost a lifer. I homeschooled for 3rd grade and I went to Waynfleet for 9th grade, but other than that, preschool through 12 here. My grade school teacher, 1st through 6th, was Brenda Kelty. And then I had Mr. Barham for 7th and 8th, and he is still here. So that's exciting. After graduating the high school, I went on and took a gap year, did a whole ton of stuff, and then went to Hampshire College in Amherst, Massachusetts for 4 years. Graduated there in 2019 and took a job in Washington, D.C. with Senator King's office. I was there for 2 years, one of which in the office every day. The other one, the pandemic arrived, so I was not in the office every day. I was kind of driving back and forth from Maine to D.C. for a while. And then fast forward a little bit more, I just started this fall at the University of Maine School of Law, so I'm 1 semester in there. What else? So favorite high school memory. This one was hard. There's a lot of them. I think that when I think about the Waldorf School in my life right now, I think of a lot of non-academic parts of it. Is like certainly, as everyone's talked about, I felt that the high school prepared me for college, prepared me for a job afterwards, and definitely prepared me for law school. But when I think about my experience in my life right now, it's a lot of like the extracurricular stuff that in the Waldorf School is not extracurricular. It's kind of core curricular. So as all of you know, we incorporate so many things that a lot of schools wouldn't into the core curricular programs. And I'm super thankful for that because I know, we do a senior internship. I was able to do a boat building internship. And this past summer, thank you, pandemic, I was finally able to finish my wooden boat I've been building for 6 years. And I have all sorts of hobbies that have like directly translated from the things that I started doing here. And I have all sorts of friends still from the Waldorf School, including ones who weren't directly in my grade because of the way that the school incorporates the different classes together to build friendships. So I think that like the academics, great, really prepared me for what I want to do, but I don't want to forget about the other stuff that really makes this school what it is and can make your life fulfilling outside of school. Another big one for me was Ultimate Frisbee and still is Ultimate Frisbee. I'm currently on the board of Maine Ultimate and do a lot of coaching for various teams and would be playing more if I didn't tear my ACL 3 times. But those are the ones that stand out. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about DC, college, law school, or things that aren't purely academic. And if anyone's worried about the social life, I'd be happy to address that. I left Waynfleet and came back to this school because of the social life. So it really means a lot to me here. I think I'll keep it short and pass it on to Mr. Stoddard.
Great, thank you, Joe.
Hello, everyone. I am usually Mr. Stoddard here, but I'm Nowell Stoddard for today, this hour, some length of time. I also am mostly a Waldorf lifer. I left the school for freshman and sophomore year of high school, going to Brunswick High for 1 year, moving to France for a year, and then returning to the States and deciding to come back home to American Eag, as it was then. My grade teacher was Mrs. Thurl, who is definitely still here. How many classes is that? Like 4, 5, something like that? And yeah, I think in terms of how Waldorf and specifically this school prepared me for college, I'm going to echo that the rigor of our academics and also how varied our academics are. So I found that when I went to college, I was really excited with my freshman seminar, which was all literature and philosophy. And then I found I was really excited with the math class I was taking. And then I found I was really excited by the physics classes I started to take. And as the years went by, I took all these different classes, and 3 years in, I finally declared a major studying physics. And then for a little while, I thought about also studying philosophy, and then back to physics. And the point is that in the high school, you're sort of equally exposed to all these different areas of academics, and you can find the areas in which you excel, the areas in which you don't excel but you still love, and everywhere in between. So I certainly appreciated that aspect of my education. I also met a lifelong friend the first day of college when our whole dorm was skipping and we were clearly the 2 best. And after meeting her, I found out she was also a Waldorf kid. So some skills you don't get everywhere. So after going to school, this was Bard College, I moved to DC, as Dylan put it. I ran away, wanted to go to a city away from Maine. And there I did everything from walk dogs to be a professional Lego builder to working in a coffee shop and a restaurant. But eventually I came back home and I ran into one of my math teachers from high school, Mr. O'Brien, at a Christmas party. And he said that I should think about coming back and working here. And I thought he was joking. He had graded me in high school, so clearly. And it turns out he wasn't kidding, and I was kind of getting burnt out of that life, so I decided to come back and start teaching at the high school, despite not having any experience teaching. And that's more of this kind of Waldorf adaptability, is they're given the tools to learn and adapt quickly to new situations. Once again, as was seen in the first year of the pandemic, it was my first year teaching. I was all set to teach my first block in March of 2020, and then we went remote. So like everyone, that was quite a moment to change and adapt. But that's been a really nice experience coming back to the school that I went to, and I got to have Myah as a student. Poets need personal finance too, it turns out. And then thinking back to my own time, yeah, I have so many good memories. I think there's some very dramatic ones, like the field trips for zoology or for the transcendentalists, where in zoology, you get to go to this island with other Waldorf schools from all over the East Coast and make friends and also spend time with your class and bond. But there's also a lot of small moments of just the social time that we get in between classes, hanging out in the student center, getting up to some sort of shenanigans. Those are really the moments that stick out to me. Yeah.
And Nowell is a great teacher, great colleague, and the students really love and appreciate having him in the classroom, and we love working with him. So. Well, that's great, right? So we asked these folks to come because they're so different from each other, and just to kind of give you a picture of 5 different pathways through the Waldorf school and into life. And now we'd like to just throw it open. And what I've done is I've asked them if they feel, if you want to ask a specific question to a specific person, that's fine. Otherwise, they'll knock them about and decide which ones they feel like taking a shot at. So the floor is open. I guess I'll moderate. Go for it. Sorry, do we need to have them speak into the microphone, or should I repeat the question?
This is really for anyone who thinks they can answer it. So I was wondering, I know a lot about, or not a lot, but I know that the writing in the high school for college, but I guess I don't know much about how the STEM helps you with that, or really much about the STEM curricular there at all, and I was wondering if anyone could tell me about it.
Great question. Can you guys speak to the STEM classes? So he asked the question. People have spoken about the writing and the rigor in the writing piece of the high school, but what about the science and technology and engineering and math side of the coin? So go for it, folks.
I have no opinions about this at all. So that's a great question. The science in the high school, I can say as someone who's participating in it, is rigorous. You take math that aligns with the standard, American high school curriculum, Algebra 1 through calculus. In addition, has these sort of unusual topics that are not necessarily mandated in other schools, like projective geometry, where you stretch lines out to infinity, and probability and combinatorics and Euclidean proofs, and these other skills that have applications beyond just our standard math curriculum. And in science, there's a really interesting approach where we do a lot of things, what I call from first principles, which is the idea that students, given the right questions, can pull together their own views on a phenomenon and really build the theories up themselves. And then in terms of actual bragging rights, we are pretty successful, especially in recent years in things like the science fair. We've had multiple winners in the last few years. Last year we had a naval award and a full tuition scholarship to USM granted just on merit, as well as software engineers, computer scientists, doctors, or at least a doctor. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question. I feel if you want to.
Anyone else want to jump on that? It's a great answer for now. Maybe we'll see what comes up again. Thank you for the question. Thank you. Did you want to speak, or you just ended up holding the microphone?
I was gonna pass it.
All right, great. More questions, please. Again, anything that would help you to think more clearly about your own next years in high school and beyond. These guys have so much experience that they can share. In the back.
From online, is there any part of who you are now that you could attribute to the way you were educated in a Waldorf school?
Is there any part of who you are now that you can attribute to your Waldorf education? Go for it.
Well, I've got the mic, so I guess I'll go for it. I think that's such a hard question to answer because the Waldorf education is so universal. You know, it doesn't touch just one part of your life. The head, the heart, and the hands is kind of what is talked about, and I think that is held true for me. So I can't just say like this one part of me is the part that was the Waldorf part. You know, it's kind of who I am as a person because of my years here was shaped in so many ways by my education. And something I talked about previously is, you know, like all the hobbies that I still currently pursue have a grounding in what I learned here and being able to use my hands. And I love, you know, spending a day in law school and working my mind and then getting home and being like, okay, well, here's the home improvement project I'm going to work on. You know, it's great to have the diversity of skill that the Waldorf education provided me. And that's kind of what comes to mind first. But I think that like my answer is everything. You know, I don't have like just a one answer. But does anyone else want to?
Please, another.
Sure. Okay. I'm going. Well, okay, so before the holidays, all of my coworkers and I sat down and we had a lovely kind of holiday get-together where we played this game where you compliment each other, and there was a whole deck of cards with different traits that people have. And you go around and each person is assigned a trait by everybody else. And so we're going around and we get to me, and the trait that all my coworkers assigned to me was original. And I like Joe, I don't necessarily want to attribute any particular aspect of me just to the Waldorf school. There are so many other aspects of how I grew up, you know, my family, my college, who I am as a person, myself. And so I don't necessarily want to say, you know, the Waldorf school made me an original person. But I think that some of the things that my coworkers see in me, like some of the skills that I have, some of the hobbies that I do, some of the ways that I interact with other people are based on things that I learned at this school here. So maybe not 100% of my originality came from the Waldorf school, but I think that was
We get some credit.
a little bit.
Anyone else want to jump on that question?
Yeah. I think I'm like Joe in the sense that Waldorf education has made me interested kind of in everything, and it's made me very indecisive in that sense, but it's also made me never be really bored. Even if I'm bad at something, I know that it's like I've done it before, and I know that there's value in doing it, and I think that just doing things like that, like you can make connections, like as someone who's in computer science, you often see connections between disparate things in the subject. So like between the humanities, and I think that it's made me kind of value kind of mixing subjects and making sure that humanities are included and technology, I guess.
Sure. So once again, just to echo, I guess, Waldorf, it's because it was a huge part of me just growing up, it's tough to decide what parts Waldorf gave to me and what parts just were growing up. But I'd say the biggest thing for me is because I was with the same class through all my grades, just to have a group of people that I know and I grew up with and that were there for everything that I'm talking about when I'm reminiscing, it's nice to have that secure group to fall back on. I think that gives me a lot of confidence because I know going into a new situation, if it doesn't work out, like, that's okay. I can always fall back on this group of people, which is awesome. And just because I'm majoring in writing, I guess I can speak to this a little bit. Waldorf's, what they teach you is oftentimes a little different than other schools in that there's such a firm background in classics that I have been told by many, many, many teachers at my college that it's just the influences in my writing are different, and that's very much down to Waldorf.
I wanted to share just one quick story about a parent who's currently in the school who was a graduate of a Waldorf school, not ours, but the Green Meadow Waldorf School. And upon graduation, he had to decide whether he wanted to continue building fine furniture, which is a skill that he learned, to be a doctor, or to go to conservatory and play the cello. Right? He had all those possible paths open. He decided in the end to go to medical school, and he is a doctor to this day, but he also makes all the beautiful furniture in his house, and he continues to play his cello at a really high level to this day. And so we see that sort of thing in our grads. Other questions? 8th graders, come on, tell us your deepest questions. Go for it.
My novel? My poetry book's called Ego and Therapy, but my novel, it's through a very pulp fiction press, and so they gave me a formula through which I had to make the title. So it is Emmett Buell, Revenge Seeker, A Western Adventure.
Wait, say that again, one more time.
It is Emmett Buell, Revenge Seeker, A Western Adventure. It's very the type of the press has 3 arms: westerns, thrillers, and romance, and it's very pulpy.
And could he get his hands on a copy if he wanted to read it?
Absolutely.
Great. Good question. Let me go for someone else and ask you. Go for it. Sorry, one more time. Oh, yeah.
How was the change in
So can you speak to that relationship between your time in a public school and also here, and what was like to go back and forth? Thank you.
So my experience going from Waldorf school to public school freshman year of high school was interesting because I had friends already in that school, but I realized immediately it was a very different the energy of a school day was very different because I might not have every single class with my friends, whereas you know everyone in your class, regardless of how close you are. You're like, I know you. So you really have that kind of foundation to go through your academic day. I had a lot of really great classes in public school, but due to a number of reasons, I ended up coming back to the Waldorf school and really never looked back. I think part of it was going away for a while and realizing that I valued my experiences there more than I maybe thought I did when I was in 8th grade.
I didn't go to a public school for 9th grade, but I did go to a different school. I went to Waynfleet, and similar to Nowell, I left and I knew some people there. My brother had preceded me to Waynfleet 2 years before. And one of the big reasons I went there, and it might be a factor for some of you, is that they had a lot of sports teams. And I was a really big athlete I played soccer year round in middle school, and I was very excited to pursue that in high school and beyond. And I had a great experience at Waynfleet in that regard, and I also had great classes. But it was, like I had mentioned earlier, the social aspect of this school, especially in the high school. I saw all my 8th grade friends from here go on to 9th grade, and I stayed in touch with them, and I found out more about their lives here. And I like comparing what they were doing to what I was doing and how I felt kind of, and how insecure I felt where I was and how ungrounded I felt. I really decided that going back to the Waldorf school, even if it meant giving up some of the things that I was interested in, was definitely a worthwhile trade-off. And then I realized ultimate Frisbee is better than soccer anyway, so.
Myah, where were you before you came here?
Yes. So it's been a long time since I was in public school because I joined in 3rd grade, but I did go to Memorial Public School in New Gloucester, which honestly was lovely. It was a good school, but my main problem with it at the time was I just found out that I have ADHD and dyslexia, quite severe dyslexia, and it was not handled as, they didn't have the really, I guess, facilities to handle that. And Waldorf was a place where I could go and get the help I needed and still be kept in a class that supported me, which was really good and really needed, definitely.
Great, thank you. Please.
I heard a lot of people mention that in college they're very indecisive about what they wanted to major in or what classes they wanted to take. And I was just wondering what kind of helped you decide what you wanted to do.
So when you got to college and there was all these wonderful opportunities and you felt indecisive, how did you set about actually making a decision about what you were going to study and what you're headed towards?
Yeah, I can talk about that. For me, it was kind of a coin toss, honestly. I came thinking I'd do physics, and then I was also kind of seduced by like philosophy and economics in some ways. I don't know, at some point it came between like physics and computer science, and I sort of just flipped a coin. I think maybe there was a little bit of...
Wait, did you literally flip a coin?
No.
I would love that.
Not actually, but I think just like the practicality of it, I think that for me it seemed that computer science was, I could kind of express myself a little more creatively, but I don't know, I was just sort of ambivalent between the two, honestly. So, yeah.
So I knew what I wanted to, I knew that I wanted to study something about climate change and the environment and the natural world, but I didn't want to never take a humanities class ever again because I love humanities. So I think there were a couple of choices within the environmental major at Bates that I just said, this one has the most interesting looking classes to me, and that picked my major for me. So, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't talked about this, but in 9th grade, first year of college, I took a theater course, a microbiology course, a business course, a history course, a political science course, and there was 2 others that were an education course. I ran the gamut. I was like, I got to try everything. And trying everything was really what did it for me. I didn't know until I knew. I dipped my toe in the pool of a lot of different areas and was like, okay, this might not be for me in higher education, and was able to figure it out from there.
For me, I also had the opportunity to take a bunch of different classes just because of the requirements of my school, and bounced around sort of between history, philosophy, and physics, and it really came down to physics and philosophy, and my thought was that while philosophy texts can be difficult to read, they're easier than physics textbooks, so if I'm going to do one in my own time, it should probably be philosophy.
Great, great. Good question, nice answers, thank you all. Please. So did the thought of not attending college at all come to mind?
Absolutely. I gave my graduation speech about how even if I didn't go to college, I felt prepared for life. I really wasn't sure. I had applied to one school senior year of high school, and I got in, and I said I was going to go there just to appease my parents. I, halfway through my gap year, said, you know what, I'm not going to go there, applied somewhere else, got in there, and did decide to go, but I felt that there was so many opportunities that were available to me without higher education that it wouldn't have been the end of the world. And I do have some friends from my time here who didn't go, you know, Avery Murphy Anderson, very successful lobsterman, great guy, who went here for most of his schooling experience. And so that was definitely a big question for me. And I'd be happy to talk to anyone, Joe Newlin, class of 2014, if you want to reach out later to talk about that decision if you're online or here.
That's great. Anybody else think for time think maybe that wasn't going to be the path? Okay. Now, of course, if there were other students up here, we have students, as Joe was saying, who did other things, very happy with their lives. And so some other time we could have a panel, I think, of students who've come up with their own paths forward. But thank you for sharing that. Great question. Maybe one or two more? Yeah? And again, we'll just say this. It's not the last opportunity. If suddenly you go home tonight and you're sitting around the dinner table and you realize you had a question, if you get it to Ms. Powell, she'll get it to me and I'll get it to these folks and we'll get you an answer. You never lose the opportunity to ask these questions. But are there any other questions that are living right now? We'd love to get a chance. Go for it, please.
Another one online. In our divisive world, does Waldorf education give you tools to navigate different perspectives or different points of view?
Did it give you the tools? Did Waldorf give you the tools to navigate different ideas, different perspectives, different points of view?
I can sort of speak to that. So for me, I've definitely seen that Waldorf education has helped me with that at college specifically. The college I go to is very, I guess, politically active. There's a lot of protests, which is awesome. I've definitely participated in one or two of those. But I think Waldorf education also puts a huge emphasis on, while you may not agree with another side, you should make the effort to understand why they're saying that. And so I have found myself often being the person in these discussions at college that sort of spells out like, okay, let's talk about the other side first and then, get on our high horse after, but to at least make the effort. And I guess was worried going into college that would be received poorly, but I've found that people really want to take the time to do that and don't necessarily have the language to do that, and people have been very sort of excited to hear those conversations opening up. And so I think that Waldorf definitely gave me the skills to do that, and they've served me very well.
Great. Anyone else want to touch that? While you're thinking, in Nowell's class, there was a student who did a project on pro-life and why doing away with Roe v. Wade and a woman's right to choose was so important. And she was so compelling in her project that I think about half the students in Nowell's class were ready to change their minds, a position that they maybe held for years. So just this opportunity to explore really in depth and with real meaning the opposite view that you hold. Remember that very much. Nowell wants to go for it.
Well, I was just going to say it helps also that the leadership of this school and the way that it runs has a lot of communication and talking and consensus, which I think kind of bakes in this idea of the teachers at the very least are having to consider everyone else's point of view all the time, and I do feel like that trickles down a little bit.
So you've been great, and we'll just see if there's one more question that wants to come at this time. Sports, music, trips, classmates.
Mr. Barham, what was the best graduating class?
Don't answer that.
No comment. Well, thank you all so much. So first of all, can you make a big round of applause for these 5 alumni panelists? really, really appreciate all of you taking time out of your busy lives to come back and speak to us. And thank you all for coming, spending this last hour and asking your questions. And thank you at home who are watching this on the live stream or on the video. Again, we're always delighted to talk about Waldorf education and with the real experts and with the teachers as well. So keep those questions coming. So thank you all so much.